Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Footy Travelers Podcast.
So yeah, Monica, just remind everyone who you are as a soccer fan, as a footy traveler.
Hello, I'm Monica, and I am just that, a big soccer fan, a former player and coach, and big fan of the U.S. Men's and women's national teams, big fan of the NWSL, big fan of football anywhere, anytime, anyplace.
And so all of that brought you to the Copa América Final in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium on Sunday,
Yes.
July 14th. Tell us, what were your plans? What were your expectations? And then what was your actual experience once you got there?
Yeah, so I made my way to the stadium, and I was with a group of friends. There were about half of us, honestly, that had tickets. We had tickets secured for the game. And then there was another group of us, about half, probably 10, well, I think 8 to 12 people that didn't have tickets at all. But we were like, hey, we're going to go. We had access to a pre-event space. And so we get there maybe 2 hours before the start of the game, or the planned start of the game. And we make our way to the Michelob Ultra kind of pre-event space. And so we're just outside the stadium on the south side. And we're kind of just hanging out, taking in the vibes. It was awesome. Walking up to the gates and things, it was pretty easy.
Can I ask real quick, did those without
Yeah.
tickets intend to procure them and then go into the game? Or were they just there for those vibes?
It was legitimately, they were there for the vibes, but we just kind of say there's always a ticket. They were hoping that they would get last minute tickets into the match some way, somehow, but they were also at peace if they didn't. If it came up, great. If not, no big deal. So, and we had talked about, should we tailgate beforehand? What does it look like? And they had advised everyone, if you don't have tickets to the game, don't come. Don't add to the chaos. But there was we were like, okay, where are we going to get turned away at? And we never got turned away. So we were able to access straight up to the gates or to the south side of the stadium where they had a big screen. And it was cool because you could already see people were it was like you were at a big drive-in movie theater, because the screen was up and they were going to play the game on the south side of the stadium, and you had just a great atmosphere and energy. And it was a sea of yellow. I don't know if it's because it stood out so much, but it was a sea of yellow. So we make our way to the top stand or to the little area for the pre-event space, and we're actually elevated. We're on the second or third floor of this structure. So we're overlooking the south side. And you could see the supporter section, and they were had their drums, they had their smoke. We walked through that for a little bit, and it was a little packed just momentarily, but then you kind of got out and you were into your space. Once we got to this third part of the structure and we could see this view, that was honestly when the madness started happening. So
about what time was that?
Maybe,
if you had to guess.
Maybe the game was supposed to start at 8. I think it started maybe around 7.
Okay.
So I go use the restroom that's attached to the stadium, and then walk back. And I just run into a really good friend of mine, and she's in tears. And it I didn't know, we weren't planning to meet up. She's in tears. She's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Laura, come with me, what's going on? She's like, I was trying to get into the stadium. there was so much pushing. She just felt so, honestly, just scared and unsafe and overwhelmed. And because she was getting pushed, and she was just I'm giving up. She jumped a fence away. She was trying to get away from the crowd. She jumped a fence just to find space. Happened to bump into me. I'm like, oh girl, come with me. Let's come hang out. So at that point, then we could watch people just rush one gate and start running in when a gate would fall or when a gate would be opened. And then you could watch people run to another gate when another gate would be open. We could then start seeing from above. We had almost an aerial view. And we're like, this is kind of madness. What's going on? All of a sudden then too, they had that spiral ramp that I'm sure you've seen in videos too. And you could see people climbing up like different tenting structures, any structure, any fencing, anything that people could get to get elevated and then hoist up to the ramp to get over. You could just see it happening. And then you could see this ramp of people, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, as they made their way up and around and into the stadium. It was madness. It was just kind of madness to watch, but we were obviously in like a safe space. But then, like, for me, I still have a ticket. So I'm like, all right, I think it's time. Like, let's try to get in. The game now at this point is delayed, but we're like, all right, it seems less crowded. Let's go to let's go to a further gate that doesn't seem as crowded. And that was like where we were supposed to enter anyway.
Did you know or get notice that the game was delayed before you decided to go in?
We did. It came up for us on this. We had kind of heard through like social media, oh, the game's delayed. And we'd even been chatting like, they can't kick off at this right time. Like, we were just watching people not be let in for an hour. Like, it was 8:00 and we're like, they can't start the game without this or like this, you know, what will they do? And I was surprised that they delayed it initially only a half hour. We then assess out, we're like, all right, let's try to get in. Let's go to a Northeast gate. And I had two women with me, like both from Colombia, both had tickets secured, had gotten them that same day as well. Like one went with a friend of ours and they got in straight away at the Northeast gate. They're like, we're inside. We're like, awesome. We're making our way there. So then it's myself and 3 other individuals. One of them is this like Colombian woman who just so passionately played professionally in Colombia. Like,
oh, wow.
You could tell it was going to mean so much to her to like get to be there for this game. We start walking to every single gate. And we're at a gate on the east side. We're at the east gate. And all of the gates were locked. We could at least like kind of get up to the front of the gates. But they told us to go to a different gate. They're like, we're not letting people in. Go to the south gate. We're like, we were just at the south gate. They told us to come here. And so then we're like, now you're just having us run around to every gate and you're not going to let us into any gate. I watched a cop come up to the gate and just put a padlock on it in front of me. I was like, and all of these people outside, they're holding up their phones like, we have real tickets. We have real tickets. Let us in. Let us in. It was the like saddest cry for just like, you were helpless. You were literally locked outside the gate with nothing but your ticket that many people spent, $2,000, $3,000 on.
Yeah.
And so, I watched this cop just like, make an announcement, go to this other gate. This one's not being opened, and then padlock it. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay.
And
so
what time is
then
this, would you say?
Now it's probably like between 8:15 and 8:30.
Okay.
Maybe. And people are still like, I'm walking around the stadium, people are still scaling different parts of the structures to get inside. And there's like, I didn't see anyone get tackled or trampled or anything like that close, but people are still scaling structures to get in. We walk all around. We go to every single gate. By this point now, the game got delayed again, right? I don't know what
it
time
got delayed. If I'm total recall here, it might be inaccurate, but at least 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we finally make our way all the way around the stadium, and it's the same thing at every single gate. People just standing on one side, not opening the gate, and fans on the other side pleading outside the gates, showing their real tickets. And eventually it kind of gets communicated to us through, a police officer that's like, the stadium is at 115% capacity. We're not allowing anyone else in. Like we're over capacity. And everyone's like, that's so messed up because
that should be impossible.
We all have tickets. And it was at that point calm on the outside from a rushing the gate standpoint, but it was this sense of just hopelessness because you couldn't do anything. All people could do was plead their case and show their tickets, but no one was budging.
So what happened?
That was really sad. So my friend, does the anthem outside. You can hear everything. So she does the anthem outside. She's still trying to like find a way in. We say, hey, let's go back to our space so that we can at least watch the game on the screen. Let's go back to the south side. We come back to our friends that are all still there as well and don't have tickets. But now at this point, enough people from that event space have left and transferred their tickets to our friends. And now it's close to halftime at this point.
Okay.
So I'm one of the people, I'm like, I've had a long day. I care about watching the game, but I don't want to spend the next 20 minutes even like walking around the stadium again just to watch an iron gate.
To be in an overcrowded stadium where your seat is probably gone.
Or something, you just didn't know. And we had also heard, and like our friend that's on the inside's like, please, like, you guys keep trying. They're going to let people, like, they're letting people in, but we're on the outside, like, they're not letting anyone in. And she's like, no, they're kicking people out of their seats. That was the word, was like, they're kicking people out of their seats, like, keep trying. Because she also knows how much it means for us to like be inside. So the group of our friends that didn't have tickets an hour ago now have tickets. My phone is at 1%. There's 2 people left in the group that don't have tickets. My phone's at 1%. I'm like, I'm done. My partner and I, we're ready to go home. Like, we're just going to go watch it somewhere else. We're good. And so I transfer my tickets really fast on 1%. They got through in time. And my friend, the 2 remaining guys got our tickets. We go home. We watch the game, like, from a hotel lobby, like, enjoy it as much as we can, Glad it went to overtime just so that we got extra soccer and got to see a little bit.
Got to see the goal.
Sad about the result. Yeah, sad for Colombia. But even like I know all of the people that went in. Their tickets weren't scanned. Like, yeah, they could show that they had real ones, but even at that point when it had died down and they were allowing people back in, I think they got in shortly after halftime. They missed the Shakira show, unfortunately, but
that's what you pay the good money for.
That's what I was most looking forward to, even as a football fanatic. So they got in, but no tickets scanned or anything like that. And I think they found their way to their seats.
All right. Not without some added stress and hassle. You mentioned
like a poor overall experience. It was a poor experience, and it didn't have to be that way. Like it was great. It was great until everyone got locked out of the stadium, and that was really surreal.
So you mentioned seeing people climbing gates, scaling walls, using structures to boost themselves over, barriers. You might think, hearing Monica, it's all those people that created the chaos and should be blamed. And, maybe there were some arrests made, but let me ask you directly for your actual ideas and opinion, who is to blame for all this? Where does the responsibility lie?
It comes down to the event organizers. It truly does, because how is it that in every other major tournament and country and stadium across the world that people have figured this out, and that you can have a process where there's checkpoints along the way that's not immediately at the stadium gate itself, 10 feet away from where you're going to scan tickets, so that this doesn't happen. So to name it, it's commendable, and they have to do such a better job of organizing. And if you're going to have fans that are that passionate and motivated and want to be inside the stadium, and you've locked so many people out, like before the actual physical locking of the gates, so many people were locked out of the stadium to begin with. So why did you create this environment and this culture, both from a psychological standpoint, that people are going to want to be inside that much and don't have access to it, and from a physical standpoint, you created this environment where people are on the outside trying to get it. Like, they failed on both those accounts.
Yeah, fair. What are your thoughts on people's reactions saying that, well, the U.S. isn't ready to host the World Cup?
I think that's just honestly a fallacy. I think America's sports are actually like really, really primed and prepped and like have great infrastructure to do it. We are a really great sporting nation overall. And so I think and hope, and like hopefully I think and hope that we are ready, or that we will be ready. And everyone did say Copa is going to be this teaser of what's to come for the World Cup. And I've been one to say that too. And I think maybe teaser is the wrong word, but it really should be this, like, it's a learning lesson. It's a precursor, and it's a way to figure out the failures now so that it is fixed for the World Cup. So.
Yeah. And CONMEBOL will not be involved in the organization of it. So
yeah, I have faith, and I am so excited. I mean, for the World Cup to happen on this soil. Like, we've done it before. We're going to do it again. It's going to be amazing. And I do think our stadiums and organizers we'll figure it out.
So Cheyenne, remind our audience just how big of a soccer fan you are, and I'd say how experienced you are going to major soccer games and events, tournaments included.
I am big enough that I was willing to travel to the World Cup by myself in 2022, which I thought up until very recently made me pretty well versed in what it was like to attend games or big matches as a neutral. And I've been attending matches as a neutral almost my entire adult life, mostly because I engage with soccer in plenty different ways. So it's nice to watch it regardless of who's playing. Because I am a fan vlogger, I like engaging with fans of all teams. So MLS is obviously my bread and butter. In the past couple of months, I've gone to a bunch of USL games. I went to Canadian Premier League games, but yeah, I would say I'm gaining experience. I'm not quite at your level,
Wow.
but I'm getting there, and I know that you can definitely, I guess empathize is a weird word to use, but you definitely vibe with what I like to do and how I engage with the sport. So I'm in good company.
100%. I would agree. Yeah. And I think I got to throw you props for being, ahead of us or above us in your commitment to the national scene here with MLS and USL. I mean, I think you get to way more club stuff than we do. But speaking of the things you've been to, you were at the Copa América Final last Sunday. Tell us, what was your experience, maybe starting with what your plans and your expectations were, and then what was your actual experience once you got there?
So the decision for me was relatively last minute. I am currently based on the West Coast with this van that I bought to live in and travel in for soccer specifically, believe it or not. And I knew I needed to come back to the East Coast to take care of some personal matters. So my parents live on the coast of Georgia, and that's 4, maybe 5 hours from Miami. And I mean, given all the driving I've been doing since I bought the van, I thought I'm entirely too close to not make this happen.
Right.
And I had what I thought was a ticket connect. I find myself with ticket connections for various things that happen in this country. But I had only to that point gone to the Venezuela-Mexico group stage game at SoFi, which was incredible, by the way. And SoFi is such an awesome stadium. But I didn't have any sort of content plan. I had one friend that I was going to go with. The plan was afterwards to drive to another part of Florida and maybe take a break from the van for a few more days. And I ended up driving down that morning with an understanding that it was a pretty big deal, because what I had seen on SeatGeek, StubHub, Game Time, whatever, was that the ticket prices were still $1,900 at the cheapest.
Right.
So I recognized that it was going to be a big deal. I was also a little anxious because I'd never been to Hard Rock Stadium before. I've spent very little time in Miami before, but I knew based on what I'd seen happen with other games and just, of course, the storyline with Argentina and Messi, that it was going to be a good one.
Oh, yeah.
Because why not? And then what happened with the last game that Colombia had played to that point, just Uruguayan players and families and fans getting in a bit of a tizzy.
Right.
Yeah, which to that point kind of sounded like a run-of-the-mill issue. I know that sounds crazy to say, but people get in fights.
Tensions run high, especially in knockout competition, and yeah.
Right. And I arrived, I would say, I picked my friend up from the airport at about 1:00, and we went and got lunch, watched the Euro final at a restaurant, and then thought, you know what, let's just head that way, get there relatively early, park somewhere in a neighborhood nearby. I don't mind walking. We walked a little over a mile from where we had parked. And that infamous Southeast gate where everything went down, we had missed it by maybe 10, 15 minutes. So when I got there, when everyone, I'll say everyone, there were enough people that had stormed the gate as the gates were opening that they decided to shut down entirely. And when we arrived from that side, it looked like from our angle, it was just a bunch of people waiting to get in. And because we had shown up when I thought gates were opening, my idea was, well, forget this corner. We'll just go around to another corner. This clearly seems to be like the meeting spot from everyone coming from the parking lot.
Right.
But on our way to the other gate that we ended up getting into several hours later, we passed by this super long line to get into the club and premium level seats. And that's when I noticed, oh, there's a good couple hundred people that are still waiting to get into the premium seats. Mm-hmm. So either I mistimed when gates open, or they haven't decided not to open them yet. I had no idea what was going on because, by the way, there were no security outside the gates. They were only inside.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was at that point where I also looked down at my phone and thought, I need my tickets to load. I should probably figure that out. Should have figured it out a mile away when I had better service. But while I was waiting, I stood next to a wall that had vines on it and saw that there were a handful of Colombian fans in the most cartoonish way possible, like on each other's shoulders, trying to climb up the vines. And I thought, okay, that's a little crazy, but I've been around drunk men at sporting events before. Like this seems a little crazy, but
that's where they thrive.
Security. Yeah, I know. Seeing the video after the fact and realizing that what I saw and what I had witnessed to that point, I realized that I saw so little of what had actually gone down, and then seeing videos of like people covered in blood, or oh my gosh, someone ran in with a pet carrier with a Shih Tzu. I was like, this is so crazy. But I thought that the climbing up the wall was crazy. No one got over the wall. Security kind of peered over, and it was so funny. At one point, this guy's like, "Come up here, I'll do something about it." Yeah. I thought, oh geez, this is embarrassing. But it wasn't until I stayed waiting with my tickets loaded, but with very little understanding of why we were waiting at this other gate. I would say the northeast gate, I believe. We ended up standing there for 2.5 hours, and the only news that we were finding out, the only way we were getting news rather, was through Twitter. Okay. Which brings its own existential question of the purpose of an app like that. And breaking like real-time news and giving real-time information to people. But because I don't speak Spanish at all, unfortunately, I wasn't picking up conversations people are having with each other. I had to ask people next to me directly, like, hey, do you know what's happening? And they just said they're holding the gates. Okay. So things are just like piling up more and more and more. Again, as we're realizing, oh, the game is being pushed back. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that there are people in the stadium, but we're not seeing anyone go up the escalators. There's no opening of the gate. So we just waited and realized that we weren't going to miss the game because it was being delayed, but that I knew that something must have been going on far more significant than the videos here and there online, just because they would not want to lose. There had to be something bad enough that would cause them to lose the kind of money you lose when you delay a game that's being nationally televised. So
can I ask real quick, at this point, you showed up and you didn't realize, you said that there had been a rush into the gate. Did you realize that now, having seen Twitter and having asked those questions to some other fans about why it was actually closed, the gates?
Yeah. Okay. And I recognized that it was happening at that one gate we walked past. Okay. And that it seemed like a big enough deal that they were holding everybody. And I then realized, oh, no wonder people are calling on the vines. And when we got a little bit of news that they might open the gate we were standing at, the crowd I was with then looked up on the side of the stadium and saw people climbing up the walls and running up stairs that were connected to the stadium, but not through the gate that we were standing at. And the entire crowd just started yelling, like, don't be stupid, get down. There were a number of people, the majority of the population, I'll say, was so over it. There were children, like babies being held, full families that you could tell just really wanted to get in and sit down. And so they started heckling the people that were climbing up the building. But it was one of those things where they were climbing up the building because no one was stopping them from the outside. They were only able to stop them from the inside.
Right.
So it was very clear that there were that they were overwhelmed, that there was not enough staff to handle what was happening or security, etc. Because when we finally were let in around 8:30, which is about 2 hours, 15-ish minutes after we got there, everyone started kind of putting their hands up to say, like, we're not pushing. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe they're also doing that because, when you go through security mags, it's like hold your medals above your head, whatever. No, the mags were not making any noise. No one was manning them. And then when we got to the turnstile where your tickets get checked, no one was manning those either.
Wow.
So it was one of those situations where I was like, I don't see anybody around. And once I got up, and there's kind of these circular walkways instead of taking like a straight up escalator that we were going up to get to the level that we were at, where I turned back and saw, there are a handful of security now that everyone's in, and they're just standing there making sure people know that they're now at capacity, which is to say they weren't checking who did and did not have tickets. They were just saying, this looks like the amount of people that we should probably let in. We're not going to let in anymore.
Wow.
So that was the first point at which I saw security. Yes. Which means if you decided to wait out the whole ordeal, but you had tickets and you thought, I don't want to be in this crowd that's clearly already been proven to be dangerous. I'll wait a little bit. And when the crowd dies down, but I still know I've got 30 minutes to get into the game, then I'll go. Even if you had a ticket, they're like, no, you can't come in.
That's insane.
So so insane. And I recognize after the fact that it's a safety procedure to kind of just let people in so that you don't get trampled and there's no bum rushing, etc. But it just meant that all these people that had decided to fork over all this money were SOL because of the amount of people that were willing to get in at all costs.
Wow.
So that was strange because I felt a sense of danger, but I did not feel personally as if I was in danger. But I also recognized that if there had been a dangerous event, like someone bringing in, this sounds so dramatic, but what if someone brought in a bomb or even a smoke bomb or a weapon or a fight broke out, that the ability for anyone to get anywhere was severely limited because everyone was like shoulder to shoulder by the time you got to where your seats were.
Right.
And by the way, like it gets even worse for me. I realized that whoever had given me their tickets had seemed to have promised them to someone else as well.
Oh.
Because my Ticketmaster, like very legitimate looking scan, either put on Apple Pay or scan the QR code, whatever, with the exact section, seat, row, everything. 2 gentlemen came up in the seats that I was standing in and said, we have the same. And I said, where did you get your tickets? And the conversation was not, they weren't speaking English. They were just showing me their phone and they were getting a little bit aggressive. And I was already, to get to the point in that row that I had those tickets for, we had already passed by like 2 rows of people. So it's like, I'm standing in my seat. There's someone in front of me in a tiny row. And yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I got nervous because I thought, I don't want to fight with somebody. I don't want to be sardined into this row. I don't feel like the ticket that I got I don't feel like the person that gave me their ticket was super honest about it because theirs looked like a verified Ticketmaster as well. Like we were holding the same thing.
It wasn't a screenshot on their end?
Here's the thing. After I left, I was like, what if it was a screenshot? Or what if it was a miscommunication and they were just in the wrong section, or we were in the wrong section, or what if? But by the time we had gotten to that point, every single aisle was filled with people.
Right.
It was like when you go to a supporter section and it's GA and everyone's like, oh, I'm going to get in, I'm going to shove in. There's no room. And we were so hot and I was so overstimulated that I stepped out. And then I thought, oh, you know what? I actually feel like I could have really fought for this. But I had already watched a video on Twitter while I was waiting that said, oh, someone else was in their seats and security didn't help them. And it was two gentlemen.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't want to be in that situation where I'm like get in some sort of physical altercation. And I felt so silly. But to me, I was like, well, of course I would have.
Right.
Of course, it was in my nature to be like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, take it.
Right. I mean, that's self-preservation.
And at that point, I thought, well,
you don't
everyone
want
else seems to be. Yeah. And I just felt like everyone else seems to be squeezing in all over the place. I'll just squeeze in somewhere, which is what I did. And I was squeezed among, I would say a good like 40, 50 people who clearly did not have tickets, who were standing behind like a handicap row. And there were kids pressed up against the metal rows and people holding each other. A security person came through and made space for someone in an actual wheelchair. But other than that, they kind of just stood and watched. There were people that were straddling the metal railing, like sitting on top of it. And again, I'm checking throughout the game on Twitter. I had other like content creator contacts or people I knew, or even just like larger names that were posting their whole experience that said, oh, the row in front of me just got cleared out because none of them had tickets, or security finally came and took care of the people that were in our seats. But that wasn't happening until halfway through like the second half.
Right.
So I was very grateful that I'm able-bodied and happened to be hydrated. And I was very grateful that I was in a situation to watch the game with relatively few obstructions, visual obstructions. But I did not sit in a seat. I did not have a seat the entire game.
Yeah. Who's at fault here? I mean, there were the fans who rushed in. Security decided to close the gates. There's security, it sounds like, being very overwhelmed. Who bears the brunt of the blame?
CONMEBOL, I think. There's so many. First of all, Hard Rock Stadium has hosted so many major events before, and America on the whole, I think, is accustomed to very big events. So when people say, and that's a stadium hosting a World Cup games, they're going to be a World Cup 2026 venue. My thought is, yeah, but FIFA has been around, and FIFA does not operate with a home base. So FIFA knows how to work with security to put on safe events in whatever country ends up hosting.
Right.
But CONMEBOL, from what I understand, with conversations I've had with friends who have worked with CONMEBOL as part of U.S. Soccer or as part of any other kind of entity, either doing content or putting on events or engaging with this tournament on the whole, it sounds like they were not willing to shell out the money or do as much as they felt was required in order to provide a safe environment. And when I say that, I mean anyone who doesn't have a ticket should not have been able to touch the stadium from the outside.
Right.
There should have been a huge perimeter, and there has been for World Cup games I've attended. There has been for every festival I've ever gone to in this country. I think the craziest part was, as a content creator, I'm being so thoughtful about the stuff I put out from the fan POV on my social media accounts. And I ended up posting the quickest video of just being among the crowd saying, I'm at the Northeast Gate. It opened at 8:30. Our tickets were not checked. The mags were not on for as far as I'm concerned. It ended up getting about 830,000 views.
Wow.
And it's gotten a lot of comments. Yeah, it truly insane.
Mhm.
Truly insane. Like the most throwaway, here I am, this is what's happening type video.
Those tend to go viral
And-
first.
I know, right? You're like, oh, wow, so this is how it works.
Yeah.
I don't understand it at all. But yeah, so I posted that, and so many of the comments that I've read this week have been exhausting. They're very racist. They're
Mhm.
very rude. They're very like just they lack any sort of thoughtfulness or interest in meaningful dialogue. And I don't think that I posted that with the idea of it having the most meaningful dialogue come out of it, so to speak. But my frustration is that there are, pardon the French, there are jackasses everywhere.
Yeah, the trolls will
There are
find
going to
you.
be people. Yeah, but and those, to me, I'm like, you guys are just as bad as the maybe 500 to 1,000 tops people that showed up to Hard Rock Stadium and were going to claw their way in no matter what.
Right.
And those, I think there's a lot of people who we have documented on video who do deserve some of the blame. But in a world where crowd mentality and turns into mob mentality, turns into the most degenerate behavior, you have to have a protocol in place that doesn't allow them even a thought that they would stand the chance to get in.
Yeah.
And that's on CONMEBOL in my opinion. So,
And you knew they were thinking about it at some point, because the day before there was a communication that went out that said, if you don't have tickets, don't come to the stadium. All right. Well, Danny, thanks for joining us again on the Footy Travelers Podcast. Good to see you. A little upset we didn't get to run into each other during our summer travels, but what's been happening? How are you?
Nothing. Everything's been good. Thank you for bringing me back on. Just it's been a eventful summer as a Colombian fan, to say the least. And had two experiences in person. One, the rest of the games being watched on TV, but definitely with what recently happened in Miami, if there was a ironic or almost imperfect way to summarize what it is being a Colombian fan, and like our culture and our issues, maybe this was the summer to show it. So yeah, a little bit of a cultural understanding of what it is and what it means to be Colombian, what it means to be Colombian American, and why soccer is so dear to our hearts, to say the least.
Well, tell me then, just what does it mean to you to be a Colombian American and to be a Colombia fan when it comes to soccer and football?
Yeah. No, it's one of the first memories I had of my childhood was that 5-0 beating Argentina with that squad in Buenos Aires with Valderrama, Asprilla, and those players. And it's one of the first things that reminds me of my culture. My parents both, were born in Colombia. I was born here in the States. And so and growing up in Miami, in a place where, it's a figurative bridge where you're trying to be too Colombian, but you're never Colombian enough for Colombians and back in the homeland. And then, when as I grow older and go to places like Charlottesville for school and, move here to DC, you're not American enough to some people. So, growing up in that space of nor here, nor there type of situation, ni de aquí, ni de allá in Spanish, the team and cheering for the Colombian national team is a way where I'm able to connect myself to my culture in a way that's very authentic, in a way that I get to control and dictate what it means to me. And so, having Colombia come here for Copa America was super exciting for that reason. It's just to be able to see the team here. Never seen the men's play in person. I saw earlier this year in the Women's Gold Cup, the women's play, and that was also an emotional experience because you're seeing your culture and represented in the best way possible.
Now, you were, as a Colombian fan, at some Colombia games ahead of what turned out to be a pretty chaotic final, which we'll talk about, Copa America Final, which we'll talk about shortly. I believe you're at the Colombia-Uruguay semi-final in Charlotte.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Had you been to any other Colombia games recently? And, if so, what were those experiences like?
Yeah. So
both from the in-stadium experience.
Yeah.
But then again, also like the game day, like being that Colombia fan.
Correct. So I did go to the USA Colombia match that was here in Maryland. That was the friendlies leading up to Copa America, and that one was the first one I've seen of the men's side. So made the effort to go to it, and there it was a sense of duality. Again, haven't been born here in the States, but being of Colombian heritage, it was one of those where I felt like I needed to pick a side, or I just felt like I wanted to pick a side, and I decided to pick Colombia. It's more of one of these things where, for many of us in the Latino community, it's we'll cheer for the U.S., but when it comes to the country of our parents or of our heritage, we gotta go with them first, and then we'll come back for the U.S. So when I took out, and this is kind of fast forwarding a video when I saw a lot of just fans in general complaining that the number of Colombians at that game outnumbering the American fans. What I was trying to explain with my video response to that was, it's not that we were cheering against the US. We're cheering for our culture, right? And a lot of the fans that were there that day, they were like, yeah, we like the U.S. team. They know Pulisic, they know McKinney, they know a lot of the players because they're also watching, Premier League, Serie A, and, all the other European leagues. And so I think for a lot of Colombians, it was actually more of a surprise that we won 5-1 because we respect the U.S. talent-wise as a team. So that was more of a, we did it. The unbeaten run is still going. This is cool.
Yeah.
We showed up against the U.S. like that. Like, wow, we didn't think the U.S. I didn't hear any fans saying the U.S. stinks. It was, we're good. And so,
right.
Yeah,
it was a little self-reflection versus, looking towards the opponent and down talking them.
Exactly. Then we go through the tournament. We get out of that group. We get that result against Brazil to clinch the state game against Panama. We win the Panama game. So then the semifinal against Uruguay, I end up going to that match because it was here in Charlotte, close to DC. Was able to use my points and miles. Save myself a lot of money on my travels there. And the game day atmosphere, similar to what I saw in Maryland, it was very festive. A lot of Colombian fans together. The Uruguayos were also there as well. So there really wasn't any sense of animosity. When the foul happens to Richard Rios and the ref leaves him just agonizing in pain on the field and lets play continue, that's when I noticed the environment of the stadium change from a bit festive. Yeah, it was a little bit tense because we were down a man for that second half, to every single curse you can imagine against the referee was launched at the referee. It just felt like, oh no, this is collapsing on us. Like there was a sense of fear and anger towards the referee. And I think that began the animosity between the two sides. And so then when the game ends, I was in the 500s. We saw Luis Suarez start the beef, and he does start the beef at half field.
That was evident watching on TV as well. You kind of saw the cameras on him shoving some Colombian players on the field, like just moments after that final whistle.
Right, and it was against Borja, who didn't even sub into the game. It was just weird, like it basically then that begins then what we see, with the images that happen, right? Which of course a lot of it was at first Colombians started it, and this and that. And then you see some more videos come out, and then it was, maybe it was these three Uruguayos that then threw the punches. And, of course, I'm not going to be like, they were at fault or, this and that. We shouldn't be fighting in games, period. Just from a purely practical standpoint, FIFA's watching. If these people got arrested, they're already going to be on that FIFA blacklist. Like, I guarantee you FIFA's going to get that list of anyone that caused an issue at the stadiums for this Copa America, and that's going to lead to what happened on yesterday in Miami, and they're not going to be allowed to buy a ticket. But then the language that the Uruguayan Football Association used to describe the situation in their official press release, that we were holding the families hostage, that those are fighting words for us. Unfortunately, I think everyone's more or less aware of our history. Dealing with the drug dealers and the narco terrorists and all the kidnappings and stuff like that we have to deal with. That hits us up. That hits a really sensitive spot to us. And so,
Louis Diaz's father. I
yeah,
mean,
exactly. Like Lucho Diaz got kidnapped, for 10 days. So it's a very sore subject for, for more cooler heads to be writing this out, hours after the incident.
yeah,
Again, I'm not saying that to justify any actions that any Colombian fans took. Absolutely not. We shouldn't be going out there and throwing punches with anybody. We should, because
right.
we had already built such goodwill. And I think that's what gets to the point of, our people in our country, as a culture, we've dealt with so much of the discrimination, the negativity, and the stereotypes that are thrown against us. We have soccer. It's like the two things that, or three things that you think that I would ask someone, what are three good things you could think about Colombia? Coffee, Encanto. Thank goodness Disney made that movie because it was a really great movie.
It's a great movie. It's a great film.
And football.
Yeah.
Like those are the three things you can think about as good things about Colombia. And it begins to go south for our image with that incident.
Well, then, so let's fast forward then to the final. Sunday, July 14th, Miami, Hard Rock Stadium. Again, we've all seen the images at this point, the videos, the photos. Absolute chaos outside. I mean, people were rushing gates. They were climbing fences.
Yeah.
They were climbing into ventilation ducts to get in. And a lot more than a healthy handful, but surely not all of the people, but a lot of them were wearing those, unmistakable yellow Colombia jerseys.
Yeah.
So naturally, there's going to be people, especially online in the cesspool of the comment section on any platform, but they're, saying that Colombian fans are uncivilized or animalistic. And, I won't repeat some of the other things I've read or heard. So as a Colombian fan yourself, as a proud Colombian American, what's your take on those fans that, again, more than a healthy handful that we saw at the Copa America Final and that behavior?
Yeah. I mean, it's a disgrace. I think other content creators that are Colombian Americans and Colombian nationals themselves, they were like having this feeling to apologize, even though it wasn't us that did this, right? Like us personally. Trust me, I saw all those comments and they were bad. And I think it doesn't help also that, even amongst Colombians, they were commenting on these other, these fans that did break in, as savages and all these other, very, very inhumane comments, I guess you could say, in the sense of like dehumanizing, not inhumane, but dehumanizing comments. And it's not helpful because then it gives other people with more nefarious agendas right away the language and the ammunition necessary to label us as, uncivilized. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
It's sad for me because, again, we had all throughout this tournament, the fans have been fantastic. We're showing that, we are very joyful people. We love our football and we want to show people that this is who we are as an identity. And it just gets thrown away with these images. And it's just like, I took out a video this morning. I was like, is it Colombians that are living here in the States that do not understand, or that because they live in Miami, they don't understand how the rest of us in other parts of the country had to deal with some of the, discrimination that we had to deal with? Because having grown up in Miami, it does feel like you can live your whole life in Miami and not have to speak English, for example. And some of that we take pride in. It's part of our cultural identity as being from Miami, but being part of the United States. But I think this is where maybe it shows its disadvantage, because you're having a lack of cultural understanding that your actions are affecting not just Colombian Americans, but all Latinos and all minorities in the U.S. Because then, again, you give these images where in a very unfortunately divided society, the country is not as immigrant friendly, perhaps, as some other parts of its history, perhaps. So it's just not a good reflection. And to bring it back to the sporting part, and as a Miamian myself, why would we screw this thing up? Right? Like
it was a big thing.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing. We've hosted Formula One. Yes, we've hosted Super Bowls. Yes, No problems. No problems in those events. We've hosted multiple football games in a week. No problems. Drunk college students are not doing this. And so I get from a civic pride perspective, I'm like, man, did we have to drop the ball on this one? Did we?
And we being
Miami. We being Miami. Like, did we have to act like this? You know, from a fan standpoint, breaking in, you know, doing the whole ventilation shafts and everything, which I jokingly said, I hope they find one of them in the ventilation shafts tomorrow or something like that, which would only be the funniest thing if, of course, as long as they don't, you know, nothing bad happens to them. But at the same time, kind of wanted to be funny in that sense. But at the same time, you're telling me none of the politicians kind of saw the numbers, kind of saw the game plan, and they were like, hey, maybe we need to do something here, you know, maybe set things up. And considering that for the World Cup, the plans are there. They have drawn out where the perimeters are going to be for the World Cup so that this same situation does not happen in 2026. So when people are saying the U.S. is not ready for 2026, no, we are very ready for 2026 in that respect. For some reason, CONMEBOL decided to skimp on the security. They maybe paid Shakira a bit more. Maybe they didn't need to pay Shakira as much. And they skimped on the security. And that's what happened.
Well, yeah. So, let's go there then. I think maybe the last thing I'll kind of ask you is, and I'll give my thoughts before we get into your answer, but, you know, who is to blame and why? I mean, I would agree with you. You know, I've been to several World Cups now. It is the most safe I feel and have felt going to large scale sporting events, places with big crowds. There is such a perimeter around the stadiums that you have to prove you have tickets before getting like through the first layer and then the second layer and then finally at the gate. The U.S. has hosted major sporting events before. We do so on a very, very regular basis, Miami included.
Yep.
Drunk college kids included in that, you know. I mean, you know, people drinking is not new.
Yeah.
And while yes, the behavior of the fans, Colombian and Argentinian alike, was unwarranted and sad. From my perspective, just watching from the outside, I'm thinking to myself, where's the perimeter? Where's the security? I had heard that the organizers, or maybe it was Miami police or someone along the way, said, if you don't have a ticket, don't go to the stadium. And now today, the day after, as we're having this conversation, it's the day after the Copa Final, I'm hearing people, you know, posting on Twitter and Instagram. I drove to the stadium and no one checked my ticket at the parking lot. Like I could just get in. So where was the infrastructure? Where was the security? Who's to blame and why?
Funny you mentioned that because the same author that wrote the article for the Miami Herald saying, hey, there's this perimeter, no one can get in, got in without being checked. Like that is the complete failure of the organizers of the event. And I don't know if you saw this afternoon, CONMEBOL took out a statement saying, oh, it's not our fault. It's Hard Rock Stadium's fault. We told them, we gave them some recommendations, and they didn't follow, which is interesting because, A, CONMEBOL took over stadium operations. Okay. They didn't let Hard Rock do its thing, which it has experience in doing, which is managing the flow of people. If this was the game plan that Miami-Dade PD said that they were going to do, then where were they on game day to set up the perimeter, to prevent the people from coming in? Because then I basically had to shut off the comments on my video because everyone was thinking I made a hot take about it. It's like, no, you guys completely misread. This was supposed to be the plan. They didn't execute it. By they, I mean the police. But then who's the top part? CONMEBOL. CONMEBOL has the majority responsibility in this. This is their tournament. Should have U.S. Soccer Federation and CONCACAF maybe paid a little bit more attention? Yeah, probably, right? This makes them look bad too.
Sure. And I don't know the specific role that U.S. Soccer and CONCACAF had in that relationship. You know, I've been under the impression that they've been a partner in all of this, but it has mostly been driven by CONMEBOL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been lead CONMEBOL, but like this is where if those things are not outlined in contract, like word for word, then this is what we get today. CONMEBOL blaming Hard Rock Stadium. Hard Rock Stadium is blaming CONMEBOL. Stephen Ross is probably going to come into CONMEBOL and be like, hey, y'all need to pay me back that money because I got my stadium trashed. And he's gonna come get his money back. So he's gonna sue CONMEBOL if they don't come out and quietly give him what they owe him to repair the stadium. But also,
broken escalators were probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes. The ventilation system when people getting in, I'm sure it looks like a war zone over there at the stadium. And also reputation. That also matters too in the currency of these billionaires and important figures, right? But there's also, for example, the politicians to a certain extent. I know they're not fully involved, and they probably shouldn't be involved in nitty-gritty details, stadium operations, and setting up perimeters and stuff like that. There's people that go to school, they study this stuff. This is their professional careers. But again, I saw the mayor of Miami sat down in his nice plushy chair while there's this craziness going on outside. Like, you don't care about what's going on outside. Thank goodness no one has passed away from this incident. There were many injuries from what I saw, because this could have been a terrible crush situation.
Oh my God,
like
absolutely.
Wembley.
It could have been what was it? Hillsborough. Worse, all over again.
It could have been that, and you had little kids. It could have been such an unmitigated disaster in terms of casualties. We really got lucky. And these politicians got lucky that it was not that, because they all were nice and comfortable in their chairs instead of like leadership,
Yeah.
So
yeah, no one stepped up even during it.
No, they were more interested in the pomp of circus as was going on. The president of CONMEBOL was there on the field rather than paying attention to what's going on outside. So it really, if they ever were to bring back Copa América to the U.S., the U.S. Soccer Federation and CONCACAF have to be more, no, you're not running this. You're not running stadium ops. You're not running security. We're going to get more of the pie, and this is why. Because you were trusted with our stadiums. You were trusted with this whole process, and you failed. You absolutely failed. Yeah. But again, from a Miami, politician's perspective, but also just Miami in general, did we not realize this was a Copa América final between two of the biggest soccer countries in South America? Like, did you not see the day before there was like 10,000 Colombians outside the hotel doing a massive banderazo or basically like rally? Did you not see the Argentinians at the beach doing their own rally as well? Like, there's such a failure of connecting the dots of this is going to be the biggest thing in Miami sports history.
How much of that, additional question, how much of that is just America not getting it, not understanding how important soccer, football, calcio is to the world?
I find that question odd, because you're saying America and I'm thinking Miami. Like, we should know as Miamians that football is huge. Colombians are the third largest demographic in Miami-Dade County. The second one is Haitians, and they love their soccer too. And then Venezolanos are probably fourth or fifth, I think. Cubans are one, and then Nicaraguans. So basically, we should have already known this as Miamians.
If you're looking at it through the Miami lens,
yes,
I agree.
Yes.
I think I'm looking at it from the nationwide population.
Yeah.
Just a country that is still growing in its appreciation for the sport as a whole.
Yeah.
And perhaps those, I don't know, just in charge in certain places or just in general, just still not understanding the attention that needs to be given. And
you properly nurture the event itself, right? We spent about half hour talking about the logistics and the planning and everything, and I've not been able to mention that it took Argentina 115 minutes to beat Colombia. I've not been able to talk about how James Rodriguez was the MVP of the tournament. I've not been able to talk about how Lucho scored 3 goals. I've not been able to talk about how Santi Arias came up clutch as a substitute for Munoz. Not being able to talk about how Mojica was a gladiator on the left back on defense. You know,
and I didn't get in touch with you to talk about those things because to your point, this has clouded that conversation.
Exactly. So all of the sporting achievements that Colombia have achieved in this tournament, you know, not just in the final, that, you know, we lost the final. Cool. We lost it. Winners and losers at the end of the day. But we had a 28 game win streak. You know, it started after we lost to Argentina in the World Cup qualifiers in 2022. It ended with Argentina this time around. But wow, right? We drew Brazil when a lot of people thought that Brazil were top dogs still. We dominated, you know, Costa Rica. We took care of business Paraguay. We dominated Panama. And then we grinded that game out against Uruguay. Like, we played beautiful soccer and we played smart soccer. We played, you know, every single game situation. We went through it. And I was not able to talk about it in more detail because of all this that happened, unfortunately.